You know that feeling when someone stabs you in the back at work? Yeah, multiply that by 100. My VP fired me, called me just a footnote in front of an $80 million deal. She thought she'd won. She thought I was nothing. But here's the thing about footnotes. Sometimes they contain the most important information. 3 months later, I walked into that same conference room. And when the buyer's lawyer asked, "Who's the assignee?" I raised my hand. You should have seen her face. The color drained so fast, I thought she might pass out. The lawyer leaned over and whispered to her, "Oh, you are so screwed. Stick around, because this is the story of how I went from fired to holding all the cards. And trust me, revenge tastes better than any corner office. Let me take you back 6 years. I was 28, hungry, and probably too naive for my own good. I just joined TechVenture Solutions as a senior contract analyst. Not glamorous, I know, but I was good at what I did, really good. While everyone else was focused on the flashy deals and networking at happy hours, I was in the weeds of contracts, making sure every comma was in the right place, every clause was airtight. My boss, Jennifer Morrison, or Jen, as she insisted we call her, was the VP of Strategic Partnerships. 39, impeccably dressed, with this shark-like smile that should have been my first warning. She'd made her career on big deals, and she wasn't shy about taking credit for other people's work. But I didn't care about credit. I cared about doing good work, building something real. We were working on the Titanium project, a massive software acquisition that would put our company on the map. $80 million. The biggest deal in company history. Jen was leading it, but I was the one who'd structured the entire framework. Every protection clause, every contingency, every single detail that made this deal possible. That was me. The problem started about 3 years in. Jen was getting impatient. The Titanium project was taking longer than expected, and her bonuses were tied to closing big deals. One day, she called me into her office. "We need to simplify the Titanium contracts," she said, not even looking up from her phone. "Cut out 30% of the clauses. The buyers are getting nervous about the complexity." I felt my stomach drop. "Jen, those clauses are protection for us. If we remove them, are you questioning my judgment?" She finally looked at me, and her eyes were ice cold. "I'm saying that legally we'd be exposed. The IP transfer alone requires. I don't need a lecture from a contract analyst about business strategy." She stood up, walking around her desk. "Do what I said, or I'll find someone who will." But here's where I made my mistake. I thought I was doing the right thing. I went over her head to legal. I explained the risks, showed them the analysis. They agreed with me. They sent a memo to Jen saying the clauses had to stay. You might think that's where things got better. That common sense prevailed. Oh, you sweet summer child. In corporate politics, being right is sometimes the worst thing you can be. And Jen, she didn't forget. She just waited, asterisk, asterisk. For the next 6 months, my life became hell. Suddenly, every report I submitted had errors. Projects I'd led for years were reassigned. I was left off email chains. In meetings, Jen would cut me off mid-sentence or pretend I hadn't spoken. Classic corporate warfare. But I kept my head down and kept working on Titanium. Because here's the thing nobody knew. When we'd originally structured the deal, there was a clause I'd insisted on. A standard assignee clause that gave certain key personnel veto rights on the final transfer. It was buried on page 47 of a 200-page contract. Standard operating procedure to protect the company in case key employees left. The assignee had to approve any modifications to core terms. And who was listed as the primary assignee? You guessed it. I'd forgotten about it. Honestly, it was just good practice. But that little clause was about to become my nuclear option. The beginning of the end came on a Tuesday. Jen called an all-hands meeting. The Titanium buyers were finally ready to close. After 4 years, we were going to do it. $80 million. Stock options for the whole team. Bonuses that would change lives. Jen was radiant. She'd already been promised a promotion to EVP when the deal closed. 7-figure compensation package. I was genuinely happy. Despite everything, I'd helped build this. It mattered. After the meeting, I stopped by Jen's office to congratulate her. She was on the phone, but she waved me in. Then I heard her say, Yeah, dead weight. Once this closes, I'm cleaning house. Starting with that analyst who's been a thorn in my side for months. She saw my face and smiled. That shark smile. She hung up and looked at me like I was an insect. Did you need something? I should have walked away. Instead, I asked if she was talking about me. And that's when everything changed. Asterisk, asterisk. Listen, she said, leaning back in her chair. You're fine at your job, but you don't understand how business works. You're too rigid, too focused on the small stuff. This company needs people who can see the big picture. I understand perfectly. I said quietly. I just don't understand why you're willing to take unnecessary risks for a faster close. Her face hardened. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You think you're smarter than everyone else. You think your little contract clauses matter more than relationships, more than momentum. They matter when they protect the company. You're fired. Just like that. 2 words. 4 years of work, gone. You can't. I absolutely can. HR will have your termination paperwork by end of day, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. I walked out of there in a daze. By the time I got back to my desk, my access was already being revoked. I had 20 minutes to pack my things while a security guard watched. My colleagues avoided eye contact. Jen walked by once, coffee in hand, chatting with another VP. She didn't even glance my way. I was a footnote, already erased. The first 2 weeks were dark. I'm not going to lie to you. I questioned everything. My career, my judgment, whether I'd made a huge mistake by not just playing along. But then I got angry. And when I get angry, I get thorough. I started going through everything I'd kept. And yes, I kept copies of my work. All legally obtained, all mine. I reviewed every document, every email, every contract structure I created. And that's when I found it again. Page 47, the Assignee Clause. I read it 3 times to make sure I understood. Then, I called a lawyer friend from law school. She read it and let out a low whistle. This is, wow, you have veto power over any substantive changes to the deal terms. And since you're no longer an employee, they can't just remove you as assignee without your consent. That would require renegotiating the entire contract. I finished, which would take months, maybe years. You could kill this deal. I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Power. But I didn't want to kill the deal. That would hurt innocent people, my former colleagues who had nothing to do with this. The company itself, which I still believed in. No, I wanted something much more specific. I spent the next month preparing, making calls, consulting lawyers, understanding every angle. Because I wasn't just going to blow up the deal. I was going to walk back into that conference room and watch Jen realize that she'd made the biggest mistake of her career. Asterisk, asterisk. The closing was scheduled for 3 months after I was fired. I'd received the standard contract notifications. Even though I was terminated, the buyer's legal team had to notify all assignees of record. They sent it to my personal email, which was listed in the original documents. I didn't respond. I just waited. The day of the closing, I put on my best suit, did my hair, wore the watch my dad gave me when I graduated law school. I looked like I was heading into battle, because I was. I arrived at the conference room 15 minutes early. The receptionist looked confused when I signed in, but I was listed as an attendee, so she let me through. I sat in the back of the room and waited. Jen arrived with her entourage, the CEO, CFO, the whole executive team. She was glowing. This was her moment, her triumph. She saw me and froze mid-step. For just a second, confusion crossed her face. Then dismissal. She probably thought I was there to, what? Beg for my job back? Create a scene? She whispered something to her assistant, who scurried over to me. Excuse me, but this is a closed meeting. You'll need to. I'm an assignee of record on the titanium contract. I said pleasantly, I'm legally required to be here. The assistant looked baffled. She went back to Jen, whispered frantically. I could see Jen's face changing, first annoyed, then concerned. Then, the buyer's legal team arrived. 3 lawyers from a white shoe firm. They started distributing signature pages, going through the final terms. Everything was going smoothly. Jen was getting her smile back. Then, their lead counsel, A sharp woman in her 50s paused. She flipped through her papers, frowning. Before we proceed, I need to confirm. Who is the designated assignee for Section 12, Clause 47B? The room went silent. Jen jumped in quickly. That's just a formality. Our legal team has everything. No, the lawyer interrupted. I need verbal confirmation from the assignee themselves. It's required by the contract terms. She looked around the room. The name listed is... She checked her papers. Is there someone here with the initials MC? I raised my hand. That would be me, Morgan Chen. Every head swiveled toward me. I stood up, walked to the conference table, and sat down in one of the empty seats. Jen's face had gone from tan to gray. The lawyer looked at me, then at Jen, then back at her papers. Miss Chun, you're no longer employed by TechVenture Solutions, correct? Correct. I was terminated 3 months ago. And you're still listed as the primary assignee? I am. The lawyer's expression changed. She understood immediately. She looked at Jen with something like pity. Ms. Morrison, did you attempt to remove Ms. Chun as assignee when you terminated her employment? That's not. She's just a footnote. Jen sputtered. Actually sputtered. She was just a contract analyst. This deal has nothing to do with. Actually, I said quietly, I structured this entire deal. Every protection clause, every contingency, every piece of the framework that made this legally viable. It has everything to do with me. The buyer's CEO leaned forward. What exactly is happening here? Their lawyer explained. There's a clause that requires assignee approval for the transfer. Ms. Chun is that assignee. Without her signature, this deal cannot close. And since she's no longer an employee, the company has no leverage to compel her cooperation. Jen was shaking. You can't do this. You'll kill the deal. You'll hurt everyone. I don't want to kill the deal. I said, I want what I'm owed. The CFO, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. What are you asking for? I pulled out a document. I want full credit for my work on this deal. I want my severance package recalculated to include the completion bonus I would have received. I want a formal apology from Ms. Morrison for wrongful termination. And I want her removed from any profit sharing related to this specific deal. That's outrageous. Jen shouted. I led this deal. You took credit for my work, I said, looking directly at her. You fired me to eliminate the one person who could contradict your narrative. And you called me a footnote. The lawyer was whispering to the buyer's CEO. He looked troubled. Our CEO looked at me, then at Jen. If we don't agree, then I don't sign. The deal dies. And you spend the next 2 years in litigation trying to break a contract that I designed to be unbreakable. I watched it happen. The exact moment Jen realized she'd lost. The lawyer leaned over to her and whispered, loud enough for me to hear, "Oh, you are so screwed." It took another 2 hours of negotiation. The buyers were surprisingly sympathetic. Their CEO actually pulled me aside and said, I like people who stand up for themselves. Good work. In the end, I got everything I asked for. Full credit. My severance plus bonus, which came to just over $400,000. A formal apology that went in my employment file. And Jen, she was removed from the deal's profit sharing. Cost her about $2 million. The deal closed. Everyone got their bonuses. The company got their acquisition. And Jen, she resigned 2 weeks later, pursuing other opportunities. I signed the final papers, shook hands with the buyer's team, and walked out of that conference room. As I passed Jen in the hallway, I stopped. She wouldn't look at me. You know what the funny thing is? I said, if you'd just been decent to me, I would have signed without a second thought. I never wanted revenge. I just wanted to do good work. She finally met my eyes. For a second, I saw something like regret. But you called me a footnote. I continued. You should have remembered, footnotes are where you find the truth. I used the settlement money to start my own contract consulting firm. Guess who my first client was? The buyers from the titanium deal. Turns out they were impressed. 3 years later, I'm doing better than I ever did at TechVenture. My firm has 20 employees. We specialize in protecting the people who do the actual work. And Jen, last I heard, she's a VP at a mid-tier company. Making good money, I'm sure. but she'll never make EVP. That moment in the conference room made sure of that. Word travels fast in our industry. Sometimes I think about sending her a thank you note. After all, she taught me the most important lesson of my career. Never underestimate the footnotes. They might just be the most important part of the story. If you enjoyed this story of corporate karma, hit that like button and subscribe for more revenge stories that'll make you cheer. Drop a comment about the craziest office politics you've ever seen. I read every single one. And remember, treat people well on your way up, because you might meet them on your way down. See you in the next video.